we do have new members, it's something we were always thinking about, but making a statement about them avoiding the use of jargon, that kind of stuff might be helpful in terms,
Who used jargon?
just when people are presenting.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay,
Trying to avoid jargon
okay. I'll see if I can add that to my script.
where possible.
Remember to take the roll. Remember to call roll. Okay. It's 3:16 and we're going to reconvene, and I'm missing a bunch of board members. Time to restart. We have 2 more agenda items. All members come to the table. I'm starting without you. Oh,
Behind you.
that's what a gavel's for.
I need a little more space real quick.
You wouldn't be carrying a baby with you.
It's hard to get through there.
Okay, it's 3:17 and you are late. How many demerits do you get for being late in school? I don't know. Okay, next up is, I believe it's Brittany, right? Miss Brittany Kendrick. Licensure actions.
All right. Are we ready? Right.
We're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. So you have been presented with the licensure actions for tomorrow's board meeting. I did want to notify you all of one update. Item E, Erin Lammy, there was a typo in her cover sheet and her consent order. She actually agreed to and consented to an 18-month suspension. As you may remember, she was presented at the July board meeting, and there was a lot of discussion about her. The original recommendation was a year, and then there was a motion to pull that item and recommend it for harsher action. The harsher action was for 18 months with professional development. She actually was sent a letter that addressed the 18 months, and she was under the impression that she signed it for 18 months, but there was just a typo in the cover sheet and the consent order. So I did want to make you all aware that tomorrow when you vote on that, you will be voting on an 18-month suspension with professional development.
On item E,
Item
18
E.
months. I got it.
And then I think this may have been addressed, but I think there was a question from one of the members about some of the agenda items that may have been presented in prior board meetings that are back before you this time. Item E is one of those. Item H, Leona Ozis, she is the other one. She was originally recommended for 1 year retroactive suspension. Again, that item was pulled, and it was a motion was made for harsher action, and that harsher action was a 1 year more prospective, May 2019 to May 20, with some additional conditions. And then the third item that was presented once before and moved for harsher was item J, Alice Polonsky. The original recommendation was 3 months, and then we went back after the board meeting and asked for a 6 month. And at this time, if you all have any other specific questions going into tomorrow's meeting, I'm happy to take them. If not, those are all of my announcements.
No one has any questions.
Okay.
You're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Charter School Appeals, Dr. Sarah Morrison and Ms. Tess Stovall.
Okay, let's see if we can get us back on track here, but Tess and I have a pretty lengthy presentation for you and welcome questions at any point. We're going to stop at various points along the way, but want to spend some time here at the end of our workshop talking about the charter appeals that you all will be voting on tomorrow. Just a reminder, these are new start appeals, so these are operators who've applied to their local district to start a school for the first time. These are not closures like we heard recently out of Metro Nashville. And before we get into the recommendations themselves, which we'll spend some time walking through the details in terms of where the staff's recommendation is coming from, I wanted to spend a moment on the front end talking about sort of the process that led us to this point in terms of your vote tomorrow. So we'll start with the application timeline. We'll talk a little bit about the review process itself and our standard of review under the law, and then we'll get into the recommendations one by one. So in terms of the application timeline, you'll see here that this is a multi-month process. This is not something that happens overnight. The applicants, in this case the operators or would-be operators, have multiple sort of shots at the apple in terms of presenting the application to their local district, making amendments, further amendments upon appealing to the state board if they choose to go that route. But it starts basically, in terms of calendar year, in February. And our law requires a letter of intent from anyone who wants to potentially open a charter school. Those are due in February. From there, their original application is due to the local district on April 1. These are both statutory deadlines. At that point, the local LEA convenes their own kind of review process and committee. They use the same state rubric for scoring that application as we use in our process. And they vote on those original applications by June 30th. Within 30 days of that original sort of vote, if they're denied, which many of them are, from that original vote, there's the ability to make changes and submit an amended application within 30 days. And I should note these timelines vary a little bit at this point based on sort of when local boards are meeting. So we often receive applications from different districts on different timelines and sort of have to make sure we're working within our statutory deadlines as well. But those LEA votes on the amended applications happen within 60 days. And at that point, if they are denied, they have 10 days to notify our staff if they wish to appeal that to the state board. We'll talk about that in just a minute in more detail. In terms of our statutory charge as a board, there's two things to know. First, again, an applicant who's denied by a local board under the law has the ability to appeal that decision to the state board, and that's why we're going to be voting tomorrow again on these 6 New Start appeals that were denied by their local districts. You can see here the list. I won't go through them now. We're going to talk about them in just a moment in more detail, but there were 4 out of Shelby County and 2 out of Metro Nashville this time around. From there, the law also dictates kind of the high-level parameters of our process. So it's what we call a de novo on-the-record review, meaning that we're looking at a number of things. We're looking at the application itself, the amended application. We're looking at the reasons for denial by the local district. We're able to collect a lot of information to kind of serve as the totality of our record in terms of our review process. We do that not only at the staff level, but we convene a review committee of individuals from both internal to the state board, external, folks who are in charter schools, who are at the district level, sometimes out of state. And those review committee members help us in our assessment of the application and the full record. We also hold public hearings for each of these applicants in the district in which they would like to locate. So we had hearings in Shelby County. Some of you joined us for those. We had hearings in Nashville for the 2 that are appealing out of Nashville. And we collect that information as part of this record that feeds our recommendation to you all as well. And finally here, I want to talk about sort of the flow chart of sort of how this works. The appeal comes to the state board, as you can see on the far left. I mentioned all the information that we're collecting both from the districts, the de novo review that we do, the capacity interview. That's an opportunity to sit down with the applicant themselves. That's just our review committee and the applicant going in more detail in terms of the questions that we might have for them, and then the public hearing. And then taking all that information, again, we compile and present to you a recommendation based on our best information at that point and present that to you. If the LEA contains a priority school, then our state board decision to authorize the school, we become the authorizer. If they don't have a priority school, then we would be remanding the school back to the district. In the case of both Shelby County and Metro Nashville, they have priority schools, so these would be schools that we would authorize if we overturn the local district's decision. Our standard of review under the law is, in this case, and it's different slightly for the closure appeals that we just heard from a New Start, but in this case it's really, was the local board's decision contrary to the best interests of the students, LEA, or community? And if so, the state board has the authority under the law to overturn that decision. Okay, with that, I'll pause first. Any questions about the process itself or any of the parts of that we go through before we bring these recommendations to you? Okay, for some of you, I know this is old hat. In terms of the summary of recommendations for tomorrow's meeting, I mentioned again that there were 6 appeals that we received at the state board this application cycle. In the case of Beacon College Prep, which is a New Start school in Shelby County, our recommendation is to approve the amended application. We're going to walk through again each of these in more detail in just a moment. Gentlemen and Ladies STEM Academy, also from Shelby County, our recommendation is to uphold the denial. Green Dot Charter K through 8 school, again in Shelby County, our recommendation is to uphold the denial. Memphis School of Excellence Cordova, also Shelby County, also one where we would recommend to uphold the district's denial. In Nashville, we have Nashville Collegiate Prep. Our recommendation is to uphold the denial of the local district. And then finally, Rocket Ship Nashville number 3, their 3rd school, our recommendation in this case is to approve the amended application. So let's start with Beacon College Prep. I mentioned this is a school that's wishing to locate in Shelby County. In this case, Shelby County determined that Beacon College Prep essentially met the state rubric. I mentioned that we use the same rubric as our district partners when they're doing their review process, though there was one exception that the Shelby County district mentioned, and that was section 1.2, which speaks to enrollment. And in this section, Shelby County has a new local policy that they used in part to evaluate this part of the rubric. And this is where they said Beacon College Prep fell short. The reason they said that is because they conduct what they call a regional seat analysis. They're looking at not only are there excess number of seats in terms of the schools that are currently operating and how many students they're currently serving versus how many they could serve. They're not actually looking, though, in this case, at the quality of those seats. So is this area oversaturated? And for that reason, they said by 600 seats, the area in which Beacon College Prep was seeking to locate did not demonstrate a community need, and that was the reason for their denial. Now, it's important to note that the state board has a rule, again, that allows districts to use supplemental information as part of their review process, but they can't use that as the basis for denial. I'm going to ask Tess now to step in and talk to you about the state board's reasons for recommendations for Beacon College Prep, and then also the other schools that follow.
Thank you, Sarah. So the review committee that the state board brought together reviewed the amended application for Beacon College Prep. And upon that review and conducting a capacity interview with the applicant, we first found that it was an extremely thorough and detailed academic plan. The school leader has been through a fellowship with the Building Excellent Schools Network, and so the school leader plans to utilize resources from existing high-quality charter schools located in Tennessee, specifically Nashville Classical and Purpose Prep, as some of the curriculum resources for the school. Secondly, we saw a deep amount of community engagement. Specifically had numerous letters of support from community organizations and has done a lot of extensive outreach and research in the Raleigh community. It has a strong proposed school leader as well as a proposed governing board that's grounded in the city of Memphis. In particular, we were impressed that the Building Excellent Schools Network would not only provide support to the school leader for 4 years to support them in the implementation of the school, but would also provide support to the governing board in their first year of governance to ensure their properly oversight and monitoring of the school. It had a very strong and intentional school culture that would be clear for students, families, and the staff within the school, and had a detailed and reasonable budget, including a startup grant from the Walton Family Foundation of $325,000. In the enrollment and recruitment area, we paid particular focus here of does it have a detailed recruitment plan and enrollment plan such that it would meet its year 1 enrollment targets. It would plan to enroll K1 in year 1 with 120 students, so 20 students per grade. 60 students per grade. We did find a really compelling reason to locate in the Raleigh area, specifically around the lack of quality school options in that area, particularly around the elementary school, and a very detailed startup plan with clear benchmarks to ensure that they're meeting those enrollment targets. I think it's important to note that the state board's review committee does take into consideration enrollment and the community need, but based in the state scoring rubric, which has specific sections on enrollment, community demand, and marketing and recruitment. And as such, this review committee's recommendation is to approve the amended application of Beacon College Prep, and the executive director's recommendation, it concurs with that. And I will pause for any questions before we move on to the next appeal.
Questions on that one? It was one of the two that we're recommending for approval.
No questions.
Great. The second appeal that the state board will vote on tomorrow is the Gentlemen and Ladies STEM Academy. This one was denied by Shelby County, in part because of the regional seat analysis that Sarah spoke about earlier, as well as deficiencies cited in the amended application. When the state board review committee reviewed this amended application, as well as held a capacity interview, the review committee found that it did not meet the standard in academic operations or finance. In particular, we found a lack of a clear academic plan of how the school's focus on STEM would be actually implemented within the school itself. A lack of a clear plan to serve special populations, both in terms of the actual implementation of services and how it would fit into their daily schedule. The school has a very ambitious year one enrollment target of approximately 500 students in grades K through 8, and we didn't find an enrollment or marketing plan that would be able to operationalize that enrollment projection in the next 10 months. There was a lack of clarity around the governance structure for the school. There's an existing private school that the foundation operates that would be dissolved. There is a LaFleur Family Foundation that is currently in operation, as well as the school itself and a proposed governing board. And there was a lack of clarity of how all of those organizations would work together and what the governance would ultimately look like. There was also a lack of robust recruitment strategy. They plan to have to staff the school with approximately 50 individuals to meet that enrollment projection, and in such a competitive labor market, just simply didn't find the recruitment strategy to meet those goals. And then finally, a lack of a reasonable and realistic budget assumptions that would make it a financially viable school. Therefore, the recommendation is to uphold Shelby County's decision to deny the Gentlemen and Ladies STEM Academy. Any questions?
Mr. Eby.
Hello. When we deny the appeal, what is the likelihood that they will re-establish and come back later? And, I presume first we tell them the reason we deny it. What percent of them go back and rework it and then come back?
I think it's a relatively high percentage that do try and apply again. This is an applicant that has not actually appealed to the state board before, but they have applied directly to Shelby County before. And I think it's often the time where someone might go through the application process, identify deficiencies in their application, and be able to use that as a continuous improvement process to come back and apply again. From a team perspective, really believe in continuous improvement, so we allow opportunities to both provide feedback to applicants on the back end, but also accept feedback in our process, and we've made numerous process improvements based on what we've heard of people who've been through our process. The next appeal that we're going to discuss tomorrow is Green Dot Charter K-8 School. The Shelby County denied this application both because of the regional seats analysis as well as deficiencies that were identified in the application. Specifically, Green Dot planned to locate in an area that Shelby County determined was oversaturated by 1,000 seats, as well as found that the application was deficient in the academic, operational, financial, and portfolio review sections. When the state board's review committee reviewed the amended application for this school, we found that the intervention plan was specifically underdeveloped when we looked at its implementation for elementary schools. An elementary school would be a first for the Green Dot network across their entire network. They only currently have middle and high schools in Tennessee, in California, and Washington. So this would be a new model. And what we didn't find was a really clear intervention plan that was tailored to those elementary age students and a clear anticipation of challenges specifically for elementary students. Secondly, we found a lack of community engagement that had been developed specifically, again, for elementary students. The network has developed a lot of community relationships for its current schools in Memphis, but there was under development when it came to what would the community needs really need to look like and community partnerships look like for those elementary schools. We did find a really clear and articulated need for an elementary option in the Whitehaven area. They have been serving the Whitehaven area specifically with their Achievement School District schools for over 5 years. I think they really do know that community, and then the community knows them. And we do think that there would be a need for a high quality school option, especially in the elementary school in that Whitehaven area. We also did find strong operational plans and network level support. I know, speaking from us as the authorizer of one of the Green Dot schools, we have a fantastic relationship with their network. And we know that they're able to operationalize things very quickly, especially when it comes to facilities, and a really thoughtful and reasonable financial plan. The remaining piece that we look at, especially for an existing operator, is their portfolio performance. As you all know, we have one school that's operated by Green Dot in our portfolio, Bluff City High School, which has seen level 5 TVOS growth for the last 2 years, which we are incredibly proud of them for. But we also recognize that it still has continued work to do when we're looking at academic proficiency, especially as it grows out to be a full 9 through 12. And the network is showing mixed results when it comes to its Achievement School District schools. I think we as the review committee and we on the staff will recognize the challenge that comes with transformation work. But we do see still mixed growth levels across their 4 Achievement School District schools, as well as still struggling to increase that proficiency level. So we know there's still work to do to ensure the long-term success of those schools. And so when we're looking at a replication, I think the key question is, does the academic program demonstrate success such that it's ready to replicate another school? And I think when we were looking at the totality of the Green Dot data in Tennessee, the determination from the review committee as well as Sarah was not quite yet. We want to see continued growth and increased achievement before the recommendation would be such that we'd be recommending approval of the school. Any questions?
No questions.
Okay. The next school that you all will discuss tomorrow is Memphis School of Excellence, Cordova. Memphis School of Excellence, similar to Beacon College Prep, was the only reason that Shelby County denied this application was because of the regional seat analysis and determining that it did not meet a need to locate in the Cordova area. Shelby County determined that the specific area in Memphis where it wanted to locate was oversaturated at the middle school level by 1,000 seats, and therefore, because it did not meet 1.2 enrollment of the state's rubric based on how Shelby County is analyzing it, was therefore denied by the district. So when the State Board's Review Committee was analyzing this amended application, I think it's important to note that Shelby County has already approved this operator to open an elementary school in the Cordova area next August. So this approved elementary school would be the 3rd school in the network. So the school we're discussing today would be the 4th school. So it would be doubling the size of the network in 10 months. So the review committee was really looking at, is there a demonstrated network capacity to double the size of the network to serve a brand new community, as well as is the portfolio meeting the performance results necessary that we determine it's ready to replicate? So first, the review committee found a strong and detailed rationale to locate the proposed school in Cordova. Clear community engagement, clear parent demand, so we felt like it did meet that community need. It had a detailed student recruitment plan. It discussed how it's, how it reaches out to parents, how it's already started reaching out to parents and has determined that community need, as well as reasonable student enrollment projections for year 1. Really thoughtful community and family engagement plan, as well as a strong network financial plan such that they could financially support a 4th school. What we didn't see evidence of was a capacity to be able to serve at a high level, specifically special populations and English learners in special education. So as I said, this network is already planning to open a 3rd school, and it planned for the first few years to have a network level staff member, a director of academics, who would be supporting special populations, so EL and special education across all the 4 network schools, in addition to 1 designated site leader at each school, as well as ensuring the implementation of the academic plan. And when we think about, was that evidence to support at a high level services to those students, the review committee did not find concrete evidence that it could do so successfully. In particular, the network spoke to an increase in EL population that the schools have seen in the last couple of years and how they're making adjustments both from a staffing perspective and an academic program perspective to best serve those students. But I think they're still making those adjustments, and knowing that they would be locating in a new area would have to continue to work to serve EL students, simply didn't find the evidence it was ready to do that at 2 brand new schools. And lastly, when the review committee analyzed past performance of this network, we did see strong performance on Shelby County's school scorecard. However, we saw that the network's current middle school has specifically struggled in growth in its middle school math over the last 3 years. It's been achieving TVOS 1s and 2s. It did speak to some programmatic changes that they were making to adjust the growth levels and increase academic performance. But when we think about, is there current evidence such that the academic program is successful in the school that it's intending to replicate, the review committee didn't find evidence that its middle school math program was successful enough, that there was data enough that these adjustments were working such that it's ready to replicate. Therefore, the recommendation is to uphold Shelby County's denial of this application. Any questions?
So Shelby County only denied them because of the oversaturation. So they felt like they met the criteria. Your evaluation felt like they only partially met the operations plans and portfolio review. These students then that won't have the opportunity to go to this charter school, they'll be going to public schools around the area. How do those schools compare to what the charter school would have provided with regard to the TVOS and the things you're talking about?
That's a great question. So the data that was presented at the public hearing was that the Cordova area schools tend to be performing higher than other areas. And certainly I think that there is a clear need for an additional high quality school in that area. And I think what the conversation that, if the board upholds this recommendation, that we would say to Memphis School of Excellence is, I think this is not never, this is not quite yet. And, I think establishing themselves in the facility that they have acquired in the Cordova area, starting to grow their elementary school, and also ensuring that the academic program at their middle school is top-notch, right on, they have those adjustments made so that we're not seeing, as they're replicating, a decrease in academic performance at their current schools while we're still trying to meet those targets. So I know, Sarah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to share there.
No, that's all. I mean, I think this one was tricky, though, for that reason, because we did find some things that Shelby County had not identified in their review that gave us pause. But I think Tess is exactly right. It's not ever. It's, I think, not now. Potentially, in terms of our recommendation, you all are free, obviously, to vote your mind on this. But I do think it's a strong operator who has potential to grow in Memphis. We just didn't feel like the application, given the results that Tess described, was ready right now.
So, in theory, what is this saturation policy meant to accomplish?
You want,
I'll attempt, again, and we do have tomorrow some statements that we'll read into the record from Shelby County and from other operators who've submitted. They have the opportunity to share with you their thoughts. I think they are really rightly trying to think about what is the portfolio across the district, both traditional schools, charter schools. There are some schools that are not at capacity. They're concerned that they're stretched too thin as a district. Really looking at saturation is something that makes logical sense given where they are as a district. I think the thing that we had to reckon with was that in their regional seat analysis, while they do look at quality seats, that wasn't factored in a compelling way to their rationale for these denials. And in our mind, you can't just talk about number of seats, you have to also talk about the quality of seats. But I think, again, their intent is to really think about where the needs are in terms of capacity of existing schools.
Okay, so moving on from Shelby County, we have 2 applications that we received from Metro Nashville Public Schools. The first of those is Nashville Collegiate Prep. This application was recommended for denial by the Metro Nashville Board of Education's Review Committee because they found it partially met the standard across the academic, operational, and financial plans, and therefore the local Board of Education agreed with this recommendation and denied the school. When the State Board's Review Committee reviewed the amended application and did a capacity interview with the applicant, we found that there was a lack of clarity in the academic plan of how it would be implemented appropriately with licensed teachers. This is a unique proposed academic model that really thinks about flexibility both in terms of spacing and in grouping, but the proposed number of licensed teachers as it compares to the student enrollment would exceed the state's required teacher-student ratio. Furthermore, the school proposed to use micro-credentialed staff to bring down the teacher-to-student ratio, but that's currently not a licensing option in Tennessee and would not impact the teacher-to-student ratios. Additionally, there was a lack of clarity of how the school would provide special populations, specifically around English learners and special education. So when we looked at the projected student enrollment for year 1, they projected to have 530 students, and based on their demographic projections, this would result in them needing to have 5 full-time English learner teachers to serve their projected student population. What we didn't find is a clear staffing, both in terms of staffing projection or in the budget of how they were going to meet those specific staffing needs. The projection to have 530 students in year 1 is an ambitious enrollment projection. They want to enroll pre-K through 6th in year 1, but we didn't find a recruitment and enrollment strategy such that they would be able to meet those enrollment projections. I think that's also coupled with the current transportation plan in the application that they were going to be providing 15 to 20% of the student body transportation and had a walkability radius of 2 to 4 miles, but they also plan to locate, for those familiar, on the Murfreesboro Road corridor near Trevecca University. And you know, I think Metro Nashville, certainly the district, there is most charter schools provide a lot of transportation. Walkability radius within Metro Nashville public schools is less than 2 to 4 miles. So we didn't see how this proposed transportation plan really aligned with the projected student population that they would have. Lastly, we didn't find a robust student recruitment plan to hire the 50 individuals that they would need to have to meet the student enrollment projections, particularly in such a competitive labor market like Nashville. However, there was evidence of a strong and realistic financial plan for the school with clear plans for startup revenue to support those startup operations. But in totality, the review committee's recommendation is to uphold the denial of Nashville Collegiate Prep, and the executive director's recommendation concurs. Any questions? Okay. The final application that we will discuss is Rocket Ship Nashville number 3. Rocket Ship's amended application was recommended for approval by the Metro Nashville Board of Education's Review Committee in their Office of Charter Schools, but it was then denied by the Metro Nashville Board of Education. The reasons cited by the Metro Nashville Board of Education as denial were past performance of the current Rocket Ship schools, concerns about services to English learners, special education students, and homeless students, and a lack of transparency in the Rocket Ship's funding structure and limited funding available from the school district. So in this specific appeal, it was important not only to look at the amended application, to have the review committee do its work as it normally does with the amended application and the capacity review, but also to look at the totality of the record because the district cited reasons outside of the application as reasons for denial. So specifically, the review committee found, first, a clear need in the community. The school is proposing to locate in the southeast area of Nashville, where there is a growing population. The network currently already operates a school there, and so they know the need that's within that community. A strong academic plan that supports all learners. In particular, the operator has really invested in its supports to English learners and special populations, and the network's English language proficiency data, so their ELPA data, outperforms the district. There's a clear governance model that has been responsive to the needs of the region. In particular, they have developed, they have a national governing board, but they recognize that the Tennessee region needed a more local governing board to support those needs. So they've created kind of a two-layer governance model to ensure that the needs of the Tennessee region are heard both locally and nationally. The school proposes a longer on-ramp to meet its student recruitment and staffing goals. So this school would actually propose to open in August of 2021. It is the rocket ship model to open fully enrolled, but they also recognize that to do that, they need a longer on-ramp. So they would enroll K through 4, and they also would do that to ensure that they have the facility built and ready to go to welcome their students. We also found a clear and actionable financial plan for both the school and the network. So finally, when looking at the performance of the network schools, specifically in Nashville, it has 2 schools. We found that both schools have been named reward schools in the last 2 years. That has strong growth on TBOS. And the school that it's proposing to locate and replicate is its Rocket Ship United Academy, which is located in the Antioch area. And this school regularly outperforms the district. I think it's important context that in 2016, Rocket Ship came to the state board looking for a 3rd school. And at that point, we determined that its portfolio performance didn't merit a replication. We saw some mixed results, and the ultimate recommendation from the review committee and from Sarah was that it needed to continue to ensure that its academic program met the needs of Tennessee students and showed success on Tennessee assessments. So what we see now 3 years later is that it appears that the network has really used those last 3 years to refine its academic program. It's now demonstrating sustainable success such that both the review committee and Sarah determined that it had evidence to replicate those schools, and such that it's the recommendation of Sarah and the review committee to approve the amended application. And Sarah, I know since there were additional reasons outside of the application that we did look at, do you want to speak more fully to any of those?
I think you touched on the highlights. I'm happy to take any questions, though, because again, this was the case, as Tess mentioned, where the district charter office and their review committee recommended this school for approval, and the local board, for reasons outside of the record that was presented to them, decided to deny it. But I think I'll toss it back to you all for questions. Tess did a good job highlighting the salient points there.
Yes, Bob. I'm losing my voice.
It's all right. I think you said that one reason they wanted to put this off was till 2021 so they could build the facilities. What happens if the facilities aren't built in that time? That's still less than 2 years.
Mm-hmm. So definitely in the capacity interview at the public hearing, they shared that they have identified a site. They have the financing for that site. So I think upon approval, they're ready to sign the agreement and to get started. I think, an important part of any conversation is contingency planning. And so ensure that they would have a year 1 contingency plan such that if they, if in 9 months they knew a year out they weren't going to be able to locate in that facility, that we would be able to work with them. And that's also a part of our pre-opening process, is that we're doing regular checks to make sure that they're both from a staffing perspective, enrollment perspective, but also facility perspective, that they're ready to go.
And then secondly, I think you said they were going to be K through 4. And how do they go about getting their enrollment? Obviously, you must do some kind of advertisement or something like that. How do they do that?
Yeah, so I think they do a lot of community outreach. In particular, what I think is very interesting, and they shared some of this data at the public hearing, is that their current school in that South Nashville area, they've actually polled the families that would be closer located to this proposed school to determine whether or not they'd be interested in moving their student to that closer school, with the traffic in that particular area. And I think a very high percentage, I'm going to guess 97%, but it was really high what those students would actually be interested in moving to a school closer to home. Additionally, what we see typically is that they do a lot of door-to-door outreach, mailers, community organizations. A lot of word of mouth, too, is how we see charter schools being able to recruit successfully. And I think, in particular, our KIPP Nashville school is located in a very similar area to where this school would propose to locate. We know that we have seen incredibly high demand for that school. They have wait lists. I think, to preview things in the future, they might be requesting, actually, are there possibilities that we could look at and come to amend the charter agreement to think about enrollment capacity and be able to serve more students. So I think there is certainly a high demand, and using these next 20 months to ensure that they fully enroll at the same time, all at once, is going to be important for them.
Just two things to add on to what Tess said. It's an area of Nashville that's growing very rapidly. We also, when we look at the portfolio of school options that exist, again, there's a dearth of high quality options, so this would be, in some cases, a better option for families. So I do think, as Tess indicated, they're prepared to do a pretty robust recruitment, and I think they've got a lot of ready families in that area.
And I think that's great to provide that opportunity for a quality school. And maybe it's not a relevant question, but we are interested in all students. What happens, what's the impact on, if most of them are coming from a school, typically what's the impact on that school?
It's really hard to quantify, but that is definitely the question, certainly that our district partners wrestle with. As you know, the money follows the student, so the per pupil, the traditional district school is not serving that student anymore if they enroll in charter school. So, there's sort of a neutral net there in terms of students. But it is true that some of the hard costs are, in terms of class sizes and buildings. The district has to do some right sizing, I think. In some cases, though, it means smaller class sizes in the traditional schools. So I think there's a mix of things that happen depending on the situation.
It's an issue that the districts obviously have to.
It is, and it's why they, care deeply about these charter school appeals and want to make sure that they're thinking, on their behalf as well. But I think the most important thing is the students are no longer being educated there. The money follows them. The district does have a process to kind of think about the implications in terms of financials and students that they're not serving. Certainly.
Agree. Thank you.
Other
Thank you.
questions on any of these appeals? There's a lot there to unpack with these 6 different schools.
I don't think there are any other questions, at least I'm speaking for myself, but I do want to make a comment, because when you look at one of the first slides, it was 6 that you had to review in a very short period of time. And so I have to say this, and I'll say it every time, but the amount of work that goes into this, especially for anyone who's been on the board a short time or somebody that's very new, the amount of work is enormous. And so always kudos and compliments to you for the work you do. And I know it's a team effort, and we have those independent reviewers that are a part of that de novo review process. So I think we have to say that. And once again, we're not voting today, so I'm not going to say any other comments, but once again say thank you. Great work.
Absolutely, and I hope you know that. I know it's often Sarah and I who are up here talking, but like you said, we could not do it without our team. We have a fantastic charter team, also just a fantastic state board team. Those willingness to copy edit. When you got an email from me saying, please help, I just really appreciate the hard work that goes into us, because we do take this very seriously. We know that there are students' lives who are on the line, and so we really think it's important to make as much as we can the right recommendation to you all, give you all the information that you can, such that you're able to make the decision.
Mr. Eby has a comment or question.
I do actually have one more question. So if the board decides to follow your recommendations, that's 2 schools that would get their charters. If the then local school districts decide that they are not going to accept that, those schools then would come under the authority of the state board as the LEA and eventually a charter commission. Are we prepared to accept those, or are we thinking about how we can accept those and provide the services of LEA?
I'll start and then Tess can jump in. We absolutely are. We have the ability to collect an authorizer fee, which certainly helps with our staffing in terms of what we would need to add in terms of capacity for 2 new schools. And then we're in talks with the governor's office too to make sure that whatever capacity we need Again, we can seamlessly transition over to the commission in another year and a half, but we're actively already beginning to think about sort of what does that capacity building look like. And I think we've got, it's not going to take a whole lot more than what we have, but we will need to add to the team a bit, and I'll let Tess add to that if you have
No, I think,
more specifics you wanna
in
share.
particular, I think when we think about where the pressure points are, when we think about student information system, when we think about operations such as policies and procedures, it's really important for us to provide that support. And so I think, we have been in initial conversations about if these two schools end up being authorized by the state board, how can we act quickly, but also recognizing that we're in a unique time where the work is transitioning to the commission, but we still have to make sure that our current schools are served successfully and these two schools are served successfully as well. And also potentially cloning myself and the team, but until that technology is
Duplicate
available,
everybody.
yes, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Jensen.
Too much. Made a comment. I sat in on the hearings, some of them in Memphis, and I do share some concern with, I believe, with Mr. Cobbins about the reasoning Shelby County is denying these. And I don't know what to do with that, except the idea that your response was much more thorough and understandable. But it just felt like the whole thing was based on oversaturation in all those cases. And that concerned me. Just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you for that comment.
Just one note on that, as we transition to the commission and this board is no longer hearing appeals and overseeing schools, we are going to begin the important work of doing authorizer evaluations, and that's something that we'll partner closely with Shelby County, other districts who have charter schools across the state, but that will be the board's opportunity, I think, to really work with districts and with local authorizers around their practices and how they can elevate to really uphold the standards that we have for ourselves, in terms of the charter landscape in Tennessee. So I think this will be something that we're in conversation with them about over the next few years.
Thank you. I am now going to call on Mr. Gordon Ferguson to share a recap of his day in the district that happened a couple of months ago.
Thank you.
Couple of weeks? Okay.
Actually, October 18th.
Okay.
I was able to go down to Lincoln County, to Fayetteville, and met at the Lincoln County High School, where Billy Owens is the principal. Dr. Bill Heath actually hosted the visit. We had a few kind of agenda items. This was actually part of their regularly scheduled Superintendent's Study Council. And I think actually, Nathan, they kind of rescheduled that to kind of coincide with our visit. But Nathan was able to give an overview of the role and the purpose of the state school board. And I was able to make a few comments also. We then had an overview of some of the education license due process policy by Christy White. And then we're joined at lunch by several legislators, Representative Pat Marsh and Rick Tillis. And then we had State Senators Iris Rutter and Shane Reeves. And I think we had very good dialogue over lunch, just talking about the issues that the members of the Superintendent's Council shared some of their challenges, and then the legislators shared some of the issues that they deal with at the legislative level. I'll have to admit, my favorite part of the day was our discussion with the student panel. Sandy Sorrells, the curriculum coordinator, put together a group of students, and I began just by asking them what grade they were in, kind of what they were interested in doing after they finished school. And I was kind of blown away. We had future physicians, attorneys, you name it. But they were very articulate in what they were hoping to do once they finished their time at the high school. And just very confident and professional in their discussion. So that was a really interesting part. And then we concluded by meeting with some of the faculty at the school and just having a general discussion there. So it was a very well spent day. It had been quite a while since I had driven down to Fayetteville, but they clearly have a lot of pride in their school, and I think just hearing, not just from their one school, but having a group of superintendents there from other counties, mostly of which are rural in nature, and just hearing some of their challenges and their work that they're doing to improve our education.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because Nathan does a great job planning these events for us, our days in the district. And I know that we've gone through some changes to get it to the level that it is today. And it sounds like it's a model that we will certainly want to move forward with. I don't know if anyone else had that exact same format. I know, Nick, you had something similar. It seemed to me that you did something similar where there was a student panel. And I think wherever we can do that, that certainly bodes well for us, as well as the interaction with the faculty. But then to have that dialogue with members of the General Assembly, I think, very impactful.
I will add, I was able to take a tour of the school, not the whole facility, but I've observed a piece of technology that they had in one of their classes where it was a kind of a simulation piece of equipment where you had the skeleton of an actual person in this kind of electronic table. And you could use your touchpad on that table to identify certain organs, and then you could focus in and out, much like you do in a CT scanner, just to look at different levels of the body. So it was, I forget how much they said that cost, but it was pretty, we kind of like one of these at the hospital, so.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other discussion or comments from any members of the board before we adjourn? Anything else? He's right next to me, and he's hard to see. Bob, please.
I'd just like to mention a couple of things. One is I'm chairing a working group on high school graduation requirements, and we had a very lively meeting in Nashville a couple of weeks ago, and I think what we want to do is get the higher ed involved. Obviously, when you start talking about, changing math requirements or English requirements or world languages and those kind of things, it impacts admission into the colleges and universities. So I know Amy's going to get in touch with higher ed and bring them in, but I do think that we'll probably, over the next year and a half, this board will have the opportunity to look and see, should we make some changes to the high graduation requirements.
And Bob, just to add in, I was at the TX meeting last week, and they were talking about a recent study that they had done looking at the future of work and how that's going to inform some of the changes in the higher ed systems. And I just made the point that we're just in the very initial stages of looking at our high school graduation requirements, wanting to maintain the rigor, but make sure that they're relevant and related in terms of the skills and the knowledge that students need, not only for college, but for the workforce as well. So I think they're looking forward to working with us on that as well.
Good. And then the second thing, Amy and I will be presenting at the Tennessee School Board Association on Saturday morning. Again, the link between state board and local boards, and addressing any local issues and listening to them. So.
Both very important, so thank you for your leadership on that. I think it's my microphone acting up, or maybe I'm talking too closely to it.
That's me on the cords.
Okay. I was trying to cover for you.
I confess.
Thank you for your leadership.
Lillian, can I just mention
Gordon.
one other thing? I was really impressed with our visit this morning to the Maury Middle School. I know we split up into different groups. I think we had to have drawn the best draw, because we had a great group. We were entertained with the choir initially, and then got to hear from the principal, who in my mind, was just outstanding. But one of the comments that was made, we were in a room where they're trying to use kind of different methods in teaching, and including the physical environment. And the question or the comment was made about how our kids are learning so much differently today than they were even 5, 10 years ago, with just all the technology and things like that. And when I was kind of listening to the assessment and the strategic plan, I was just going through the back of my mind about, are we continuing to focus on really adjusting the way we're doing things to adapt to how these kids are learning now? And I just wanted to throw that out as an observation.
Well, we talked about, how do you share those successes, because it's the individualized or personal learning communities that they're being launched in that particular school. So we had an opportunity to be with the teacher who launched that for the district, and they did have a grant to be able to do that, and I should say in the school. There are other counties across the state that are doing similar things, and they're taking it across their entire district. And so that's a lot of a district decision. And so they do get creative, and within the purview of making sure that they're teaching the standards and following all of the rigor that's expected, but they're meeting the student where they are. So if a child needs to spend time alone on a computer because the child has been told and understands exactly what area they need to master and they've not already mastered, so they can go then and work on that on their own, and then they can have that individualized intervention with their teacher right there in the classroom, and the other students are not necessarily aware of what's going on, but they have different seating arrangements that are best for the students. So they get to be on the floor, they get to sit in a quad or multiple seating arrangement with a team concept, or with a team of 2, or just a variety of different ways. And so the students are on fire in that type of environment. They're incredibly excited and truly engaged, and so we want to see more of that for sure. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay, any other? Going once? Oh, Daryl, please move forward.
Well, I have to say, we had an equally impressive visit
Did you?
this morning to Lincoln Heights Elementary, where we saw incredible student leaders, incredible leadership team. It's on. I didn't get amped up like Larry. It's on? Okay.
Yeah.
So, incredible leadership team, incredible student leadership, and to me the most impressive piece of today visiting with them was the community and family support system that they have for families. 91% of their students are on free and reduced lunch, and a really, really diverse student population, the majority of which is Latino. And so just to see the energy and the work and the effort that went into making sure that those children feel loved and cared for, and that they belong, and that the support extends even to their families outside of the school, was really, really encouraging and impressive.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to say going once, going twice. Okay, thank you all for a great discussion and for a great workshop. Now I will officially, without objection, dissolve the board as a community. It's not community. I forgot my language. What's my language? Committee of the whole. Sorry about that. Got so excited about all these reports. We are officially adjourned. Thank you.